All right, hey guys. So welcome back. We're gonna start podcast 3 for you of Brown's Optimist Club. If you want to YouTube us, we're still there. We're still hanging in there with this quarantine for the COVID-19. Hope everybody else is hanging in there. I think Sean and I both right now we're a little amazed. We are starting to get some views. We'll appreciate it, and as long as we start getting them, we'll keep coming with some new material. Today we have a couple of good, interesting topics that actually our fan base, you guys wrote to us about and wanted to hear, I guess, our opinion, if you will. You may agree, you may not, but I think we'll get right into it today Easter weekend. So hopefully everybody has a good holiday. So one of the first topics we had out there from this most recent viewing was one last move the Browns should do before the draft. This is interesting. I mean, we've talked a lot about what we think about free agency. We talked a lot about moves that we would have liked to make. Last week we talked maybe a little bit about the Clowney move, etc. Especially with the Claiborne signing. Those were good moves to make later on in the process. What we've noticed with the Browns is they've done a lot of one-year deals. Hopefully those comp picks come back if people decide to leave the team next year. But at the end of the day, my opinion, one move we need to make before this draft is it's a big one. I know it's going to cost us a lot, but I think that the Browns need to go all in, and I think that they need to make a big trade with Washington. And I'm not just talking about going and getting Trent Williams, excuse me. I think he'll be included, but I think you got to make a play and you got to swap pick 10 for pick 2. And that's going to cost you a lot, but I'm telling you, you get Trent Williams, you give up the Houston 3 that we own this year from a great Duke Johnson trade, and you give them our first next year. So you're giving them 10, your 2021 number 1, and number 3 this year's draft. In return, you're going to get the number 2 and Trent Williams. You might have to give a little bit more, but I think that's a great starting point to pursue with Washington. And I'm telling you, I know this might sound like a homer pick, but it goes back to what we talked about last week. We wanted another defensive edge rusher to go along with Garrett, and you're bringing home Chase Young. I don't know who's going number 1. A lot of people are saying people may move up to get Tua. I don't care. If you got number 2, you know you're getting Chase Young, and I think that that would be a dynamic, if not one of the best defensive lines in the league starting from day one. That's my move. Give me your input. Let me know what you think.
Wow, that is a gutsy move. That is pretty ballsy. I'm a little nervous about the compensation because I don't think you're going to get that accomplished for the compensation you mentioned. It's definitely going to be a little pricier than that, in my personal opinion. I do like taking the offensive tackle position and solidifying it by getting Trent Williams. I do think that's big. I'm a little nervous about a rookie offensive tackle. If we do draft one, it takes a lot of learning. It's quite a steep learning curve to play offensive tackle. If you've watched any of the NFL Network stuff with Joe Thomas talking about, his thought process when he's playing and so forth, very technical, a lot of studying involved. It's a tough position. So a veteran there, especially an accomplished veteran, would be nice. I just think that'd be a little expensive, but I like your thought process. I mean, Chase Young is, to me, he's the best player in the draft. I don't even think it's close. I think Joe Burrow, as much as I like him, is a good player, but I don't know that he is an automatic Hall of Famer. Chase Young, I think, really is a solid player. Now, for my big move is not the big splash move that the young buck had here. Here's my big move. My big move is hire a quarterback coach. I was looking over some things with the Browns, and I thought maybe they had hired a quarterback coach. There is no quarterback coach on the roster, on the coaching roster. We have a first-time offensive coordinator who is a quarterback coach. That's Van Pelt's history is as a quarterback coach, but he's never been an offensive coordinator. Taking on that additional responsibility, how in the world is he going to be a quarterback coach and an offensive coordinator? Whether he calls the plays or not are irrelevant at this point. And then on top of that, you have a first-time head coach who also has background as a quarterback coach. So you have 2 guys who have quarterback coaching experience, but neither of them are going to be filling that role. Now, what does everyone say about what happened last year? They say, oh, well, Baker's mechanics went bad. His footwork was bad. All of these different things. He clearly was not getting the guidance that everyone felt that he needed in order to be successful. So what do? You go into a new season, learning a new offense with a new head coach, a new offensive coordinator, and then you don't give him the quarterback coach? It doesn't make any sense to me. So my big move is I go out and I find a quarterback coach, some quarterback guru who's going to be coaching him up on all of his fundamentals so that he can stay, the quarterback that I believe he's going to be. So that's my big move.
That is interesting, and I'm glad you did that research. And I just want to point out a topic, because now that I'm hearing that, yes, I did go with the big splash move, just because I think, again, I know it's going to cost a little bit more than what I mentioned. I just thought that's a nice starting point. But not having a quarterback coach, first time offensive coordinator, as you mentioned, first time head coach. Last year was a little bit different. If you can remember, because I feel that Kevin Stefanski is going to, and Van Pelt, they're going to be in that quarterback's room. They're going to be teaching this offense together, spending a lot of time, as they should, with the offense. But first-time head coaches, we talked a lot about this in the past. And what was Freddie Kitchens going to do? He was always with the offense, never with the defense. But at that time, he had somebody that was a head coach in the National Football League before. He could trust them a little bit on the defensive side. We don't have that this year. We got we got a guy from San Francisco who I think is going to be great. I think he's a young and upcoming star. But Stefanski needs to do a lot more of that balance back and forth with the offense and the defense this year. So you bring up a really good point. That's very interesting. I did not know that they didn't have that on the roster, and that would be a very good pickup. And I think that's something you should probably start doing now while you're implementing this offense.
Absolutely. Okay, well, the second topic that we were going to talk about, and this is brought up by multiple viewers, is Baker Mayfield's leash. At what point in this year, if things are not going well, do they yank Baker, and how long of a leash does he get? And I cannot say this emphatically enough. There is no leash. This is your franchise guy. Now, this absolutely drives me bonkers when people say this stuff. It is a Cleveland fan disease. If one thing goes bad for a period of time, we just want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and start all over. It's ridiculous. Let me give you some numbers here. Going back to 2015, 11-2, 2016, 11-2, 2017, 12-2. Those are Baker Mayfield's records at Oklahoma. Then you go 2018. What did Baker Mayfield do? Oh, I don't know. He just broke the rookie touchdown record for quarterbacks, right? And then last year, in a season that we know was an absolute farce. It was a joke, coaching-wise. It was nothing short of pathetic, the way the team was coached last year, or not coached. And now we're going to talk about Baker being pulled, that he has a leash at this point. I'm not going to say that all of his performance last year was his own fault. I think a lot of it was coaching. He has to take responsibility for some of it. Don't get me wrong. There is no leash, though. There is no way. Baker Mayfield is your quarterback. He's your franchise guy. Get it out of your head. Yes, we brought Case Keenum in, and he's your insurance policy if Baker gets hurt or something terribly goes wrong. But Baker is your quarterback. There is no leash. What are your thoughts on that, Mark?
Could not agree with you more. I mean, this is something that's garbage Stephen A. Smith talk at the moment. I mean, these types of things should not hit the media, and it is a Cleveland disease. Let me tell you how long Baker Mayfield's leash is. It's non-existent. You don't bring in a Kevin Stefanski and interview the entire freaking NFL without your first question being, is Baker Mayfield your quarterback? And I believe that's what the first question was from not only ownership, but Moneyball himself. And I couldn't agree with you more that there is no leash. The only minimal possibility you have at Case Keenum starting any game this year is with a nagging injury, a game that means nothing to us, which is very hard and far-fetched at the moment at the end of the year, or if Baker Mayfield truly starts losing games on his own. I don't mean getting a sack at the fourth quarter to end the game or throwing an interception in the end zone after a tip ball because Odell Beckham couldn't catch it. I'm talking Baker Mayfield losing you games on his own bad decision making, game after game, week after week. I don't see that happening with him. I didn't see it at Oklahoma, as you mentioned. Great record there. I didn't see it in his rookie year. So at the end of the day, he has no leash. End of story. That's my opinion.
I'm glad to see we see things the same way in that particular instance, because I'm blown away by all the talk. I think, so much of it is just clickbait, that they put out there. Like you say, the Stephen A. Smith stuff, just talking nonsense in order to get people to, click on their links and so forth, because there's no way that that's going to happen. Just one more thing, and then I'll let you comment further. Last year was the anomaly. The previous seasons are who Baker Mayfield is. His 3 years at Oklahoma, his rookie year at Cleveland. That's who he is. Last year was the anomaly, not the other way around. People want to paint this picture of that's the quarterback that he is, what we saw last year. That was so out of character for him that it's not even funny. And you throw the big personality wide receivers on the team with no guidance from the coaching staff, and it was just a big old mess. So we are in total agreement on that one.
Yeah, I think, the locker room last year, zero accountability. I think we talked about that in a couple podcasts ago, that, at the end of the day, there was so much going on that came out on Black Monday with inside the week-to-week basis and not having game plans. I don't see that happening. I think Stefanski's a rhythmatic guy. I think that he's going to be, one day at a time. I think he's going to be 1 week at a time. He's not going to be worried about who he's playing, down the road or when the Steelers are coming to town. Yeah, those are big games, but I think his planning is going to be on point. I think you're going to see a lot out of Baker Mayfield in his third year, and yeah, no leash at all, in my opinion. So, we talk a lot about how this coaching shift, though, and it kind of goes into another area here. So, one of our topics that we wanted to talk about today a little bit was, the most important, if you will, assistant coach, or what we expect the most out of an assistant coach this year. And I think we want to talk a little bit about offense and defense, because I think they're both important. So I'm going to start with offense. I like to hear what your opinion is on what I say, and then we'll go from there, and we'll bring up defense here eventually. So my guy would be Bill Callahan, offensive line coach. I think the game's won in the trenches. I think that we bring him in. He had a couple of games where he ran the Washington Redskins last year. He's been a head coach. I mean, he's been there at all levels. I think he was with the Raiders from 2001 to 2003. After that, he was with Nebraska, I believe, the Big Ten. But, I think this is where the games are won, deep down on the line. You need to implement this new scheme. It needs to go smooth as heck. You need to protect Baker. I mean, we just talked about this a little bit ago, and, he's our franchise guy. We need to make sure he does not get hit. Part of what Baker was good at in, 2018 is he had that ability to scamper out and run when needed. You didn't see that a lot last year, and I think it was because there was a dysfunction there across the offensive line where, if he did decide to roll right or roll left, he didn't know who was going to be there or when, the offensive tackle was going to stop blocking. So at the end of the day, that's who I want to see the most out of is our offensive line coach. I think it's a big deal. And more importantly, on top of protecting Baker, I think Chubb should repeat the numbers that he had last year. I mean, he's only going to get better. Maybe the number of yards are going to be down a little just because Kareem Hunt's going to play the full season. At least we hope so. But at the end of the day, what you see Stefanski doing, running the ball 57% of the time, using the two-back set, those running backs, including Chubb, I think their numbers got to be high, and that's going to start with that offensive line.
Yeah, when we started this topic and who we were going to discuss as far as offensive and defensive coaches, we didn't discuss which ones each of us were going to choose. And Bill Callahan was certainly, right up there with me. I was going to choose him. I was very close to choosing him. And I'm embarrassed to say right now that I can't think of the name of the guy that I'm going to talk about, but I'll tell you his position. My coaching position that I'm most concerned about this year is the wide receiver coach. Last year, I think if you look at all the drama that we witnessed on the field and on the sidelines, 90% of it, if not more, 90% of it came from the wide receiver room. And, we had Odell and Jarvis's college coach now as their wide receiver coach for the Browns last year. I don't believe he's back, but I can't think of who the receivers coach is. I think it's a young kid. That person's role is going to be of vital importance to keep the drama to a minimum. Of course, a lot of that's going to be on Stefanski as well, but we have to have disciplined route running. Sometimes last year we saw the routes get lazy. Anytime you're running a play action offense, it is critical for two things. Number one, those receivers have to block. Now, Jarvis has always been a good blocker, so I can't argue with that there. But you also have to run disciplined routes. There may be a time where someone's in man coverage and we have a run play called, and if you're supposed to run that guy off and you're supposed to go deep and run hard to make them think it's run, to get them out of there, to clear out an area for the back, then you better do it. You can't be lazy. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how the wide receivers are coached this year. We saw what a big difference it was when Brian Hartline took over the wide receivers for Ohio State. I mean, night and day difference. I mean, they went from being, just a bunch of guys who you roll the ball out and they go out and play, to now Ohio State's receivers really are getting coached up. So I'm really hoping that we see a big difference there, from the Browns in that regard.
Before we go on, I just want to comment. That's a great choice there. And, you think a little bit more, and as you're talking about this, I'm thinking to myself, you're right. This is going to be needing to be a disciplined group and core out there, including whoever is going to be our number 3 receiver, right? So at the end of the day, and I know the NFL has changed, but and I'm embarrassed to say this on a Browns podcast, but one of my all-time favorite wide receivers in the NFL history, Hines Ward. The dude did it all, and biggest thing he did, I think, was impressing me was his blocking ability. The dude wasn't afraid to mix it up downfield, come back, hit the linebackers. And again, I know the NFL is getting a little bit soft out there, and for the right reasons. They need to be safe and get these guys healthy. But at the end of the day, I'd love to see one of our guys start blocking like that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and I think Jarvis Landry does a pretty good job with that. Like I said, but you need everyone to be on the same page. Sometimes I wonder whether or not that's what happened to someone like Rashard Higgins last year, who got in the doghouse and couldn't get out of the doghouse, couldn't even get dressed for games. He was inactive so many times. Maybe it was because of the blocking. It's of critical importance. Hines Ward, great example. As much as I hated that dude when Browns played him, he definitely did all those little things correctly. So I can't disagree with you there. Okay, now those are the offensive coaches. So if we go in and we talk about the defensive coaches, I know we were kind of reluctant to pick coordinators, but I couldn't help it. My defensive assistant coach that I'm going to look at is Joe Woods. So I was doing a little research on Joe Woods, and there are some things that I did not know about him as we were talking about this topic for the podcast. I went and did a little bit of a dig on his record there. He was actually already a defensive coordinator. I did not realize that. I thought the Browns were going to have 2 first-year coordinators. They do not. So when Vance Joseph was the head coach of the Broncos, Joe Woods was his defensive coordinator for a couple years. He was secondary coach a couple years before that, and then he was the defensive coordinator, and they ranked in the top 5 both of the years that he was there. Now, to be fair, they had some pretty good talent on those teams, so obviously, you're going to have success if you have really good players, and the Broncos had good players. But, I'm at least very, I guess you would say it has a calming effect that he has been a defensive coordinator before, and that it's not going to be all new to him, new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. I am a little anxious to see what type of defensive front he's going to play, because I know the 49ers were, a base 3-4 defense, but, they did get into 4-man looks sometimes. I think everyone's pretty much multiple anymore. They get into multiple fronts. I don't really think you need to be married to a 4-3 or a 3-4. I don't think very many teams are anymore. But nonetheless, I'm anxious to see what he's going to do with the two cornerstone pieces of our defense. What are you going to do with Myles Garrett, and what are you going to do with Denzel Ward? I want to see how these two guys fit into your plans. And the only other thing I'll say is this: I don't think he's going to get to the Browns, and I'm glad. But what if they would draft someone like Isaiah Simmons from Clemson? What would your plan be for someone like him? To me, he's Jabril Peppers too. And I know you were high on Peppers coming out of Michigan. I didn't like Peppers for the same reason I don't like Isaiah Simmons. Whenever someone talks about, he can play linebacker or he can play safety, I just sit there and say to myself, what is he? I want to know what this cat is before I draft him. So, that makes me nervous. But Joe Woods is my coach. I want to see how he's going to utilize who I think are some of the best young defensive players in the NFL. And to me, I want to see that drastic improvement in how the defense performed. I'm tired of having all this talent and then we underachieve. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, in general, from a coordinator, again, did not know that he was a DC before. So that's very impressive and important, I think, to start off. Yeah, I agree. I mean, at the end of the day, you have cornerstone pieces that we're hoping to lock up here long term. These guys are really, really good. They're not great yet, but they're really, really good. And a new time coach needs to lean a little bit on these guys. But what that does for me is that means that you need to have these leadership roles given out at the beginning of the season. Right now, when we should be in our mini camps and OTAs, these guys need to take that bigger step. Whether they're hosting these type of Zoom meetings or talking about, what Joe wants to put in as a DC, they need to start leading those rooms, whether it's the defensive line room or whether it's the DB room. Those guys need to step up in their own point and help that coordinator out to succeed. Bringing up the, point of, the Isaiah Simmons linebacker coming out of, Clemson, where he is in the draft. I'm not high on him. I did like Peppers coming out, especially where we grabbed him at. He was a bust, but I also think when you're lining somebody up 25 yards down the field, it's never going to work. But at the end of the day, the guy and the defensive coach that I expect the most out of is Jason Tarver. He's the linebackers coach, and we talked a lot about this in previous podcasts, but I was so happy that the Browns did not spend money on the linebackers we had, injury prone and just a little bit too high numbers from Joe Schobert, even though I think he was okay. But I'm a Mac fan, and I'm going to tell you right now, he needs to be the leader of that defense. He needs to be the captain on the field. He needs to grind in the film room. But I expect a lot out of our linebackers this year. They're going to be young, but they need to be focused. They need to lead by example on the field. They need to create turnovers. I did some digging. We had in the past 3 years 0 linebackers in the top 20 for stats. There was some teams that had 2 guys in the top 20. We had 0. That's embarrassing. So when people think that, we should have signed these guys, it's not. They weren't that good. At the end of the day, it just shows the Browns on paper looked like a better team than we were. We didn't have the depth. Our defensive line has a bunch of big names on it, but when you're making tackles 3, 4, 5 yards down the field, that's not impressing me. I want tackles for loss. I want turnovers. I want forced fumbles. Those are the things our linebackers should be doing. They should be tipping balls, and our DBs should be picking them and going for 6. And that's what I expect. I expect Jason Tarver to step up, really implement what Joe Woods wants to do, get our linebackers, Mac Wilson and Taki, whoever is going to be those other guys out there, get them to lead by example. I want them flying around. That's why we drafted them last year, and I hope to see it.
Yeah, I certainly hope to see a big improvement from the linebacker room as well. Mac Wilson, I think, is an impressive player. Everyone talked about he was so young last year that he came out, too soon. But I thought he held up well. I thought he played with maturity. He carried himself with maturity. And I'm hoping we'll see that big growth. Typically, that sophomore year, you see big growth from a player. That second year in the NFL. That's why I think these mini camps would have been so helpful, especially for these second-year guys. But, it is what it is. Apparently, he's in contact with Stefanski, pretty consistently and so forth. I'm sure he is with Woods as well. stay on top of it. I couldn't agree with you more. We need to have, real progress from that room with those young players. It's nice to have a veteran come in. They brought in that Goodson. Hopefully he can bring some leadership to the room, and maybe that's someone that Woods feels will really fit what he wants to do, and this guy will just springboard and jump out of nowhere. That happens sometimes. Guys just can't find their role with the team, and then they finally get someplace, and all of a sudden they explode. So maybe we'll be lucky enough for that to happen for the Browns. Okay, now I'm trying to think of the last one here. It's a hot topic in the news. I know all over Twitter, everyone's opinion on the new Unis is it's all over the place. You got people who are screaming that, Browns fans are pathetic because all we talk about are uniforms, and, we'd rather talk about wins and losses and all these different things. But I got to tell you, when they came out with the current uniforms, I was excited. I thought maybe they'd go with something a little bit more drastic. They're going to change the uniforms, right? They were going to get away from the more traditional uniforms and do that. And then they threw that slop out there. And I'm like, are you kidding me? We waited for those uniforms for so long, and then we saw that. So here's my thing. I want to see it with these new unis, the following. I want to go back to the mid to late 80s Browns unis. Okay. I want the white face masks. I want the white pants with the narrow stripes. You got the 2 orange stripes surrounding a narrow brown stripe down the side. I want, the old striping on the sleeves. That was so cool looking on those unis. I want to go back to the old style. I don't want any more of this trash. I want the plain brown numbers on the white jersey. I want the brown jerseys with the plain white numbers, no outlines, no shadowing. I want old school. What do you want, Mark?
Son of a bitch. You stole my thunder. If I let you read this, you wouldn't believe it. Give me the 85 classics. I want the brown top with the white face masks and white pants. If you do any sort of change-ups to that, you put the brown pants from 2012 on them, so you're brown on brown. Give me the 85 white tops with the white pants with the thin linings, like you say. We couldn't agree more right here. I'm sick of this garbage. You see these new teams try. You look like the XFL, the Arena Football League, with some of the shit that's out there today. I just don't like it. I think I want the Browns to go back to the old school, back to the traditional. I want them to start just grinding away and become that team that they were back then. I want them to just really showcase what Cleveland football's about. I mean, it goes back to Ohio in general is one of the top 3 states, for pro football players. Let's show them why. Let's give them a little bit of input into the history in the past here with Cleveland. This a little young pup here meeting old school classics, and that's what we need to do.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. When I would watch NFL games, the past couple of years, it would always be striking to me, like if the Packers and the 49ers played, they would be on TV. I'd be like, man, those are awesome uniforms. And they were plain. I'm not talking about the 49ers, under Steve Young with the shadowed numbers. Those were ugly. Talking about the traditional plain white lettering on the red jerseys for the 49ers. I'm like, that's all you need. They were beautiful. They were simple. And that's what the Browns need. Bring them back. Let's not get carried away with all the, I remember them talking about orange stitching on the brown jersey. Who gives a crap? Orange stitching. I don't want any more of that nonsense. If they screwed this up, I'm going to be so pissed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. How do you screw this up? I mean, you've tried so many different alternatives since then. I mean, if you want to keep an orange pant look, okay, that could be your one time per year, with the white tops. But you're totally right. Don't care about the stitching color. I don't want, brown on white on orange, triple colored numbers or Browns logos. That's junk. Give me the old school look. Go out and play hardcore football. That's what I'm expecting from the 2020 Browns. We get the extra game this year, 17-week season. Let's knock on wood that we get all 17 in. They may not be all with fans, but I want to see 17 games. There's an extra playoff team. I expect the Browns to not only be that extra playoff team, but I expect them to compete a little bit higher in the AFC. There's still a couple good teams that are chasing, but at the end of the day, I do expect big things from the Browns, and I think we got to start grinding away, and I think the uniforms will show what we really have to offer.
Yeah, I agree with you, and the uniforms are exactly what's been wrong with the Browns for the past couple of years. A lot of flash, very little substance. So let's get back to the substance and just get back to basics and play football, line up, block, tackle, all those good things. So I'm pretty pumped for that. Now, that's pretty much it for our topics for this podcast. Upcoming draft preview. Are you up for a draft preview?
I'm in for a draft preview. I think we've gotten a couple feedbacks. If not, guys, throw them in. We want to see who everybody thinks will take at 10. I know earlier I said I wanted to trade up, but I do have a pick at 10 that I'd like to see happen. So definitely do a draft preview. And then, back at you, are you up for maybe a quick smaller version podcast after every draft? So recap, the Browns have a pick on Thursday. So maybe Friday we talk about who we chose. Saturday we talk about maybe rounds 2 and 3. Give the people a little bit of something to hear real live time before it hits Cleveland.com and all these other sites people read.
Hey, maybe we do it live. Maybe we watch the draft and do a live podcast on the draft. We'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, I'm up for it. So until next time, unless you have something else to add there, Mark, do you have anything else you want to say before we cut out?
I'm good. Hey, everybody have a happy holiday, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Peace.